Today's topic is the self and all. This is the third talk in a series from the Svetasvatara Upanishad. But because the subject is so dense, I think it's important to bookend it with two guided meditations so that you can intuit and begin to move in the direction experientially what we are going to be sharing this morning. This is a guided meditation Vivekananda gave. It's a meditation on strength. And he gave this meditation when he was in the West and at Camp Taylor near San Francisco in the Redwoods. And he brought a group of Westerners out into the Redwoods and trained them in the style of the ancient Indian rishi, the forest dwellers. And he chose the elements of nature to expand the mind and heart. One American student who passed away in our center at the Vedanta Society of Southern California, Ida Ansel, she described this. She said, "I close my eyes and see him, Swami Vivekananda, standing there in the soft blackness and with sparks from the blazing log fire flying through it and a day-old moon above. Swami said to us, 'You may meditate on whatever you wish, but I shall meditate on the heart of a lion. That gives strength.'" So let us sit straight. If we're on the floor in a half lotus, full lotus, or simply with our legs crossed, but back straight, chest slightly forward. And our hands in our lap, as Vivekananda is showing us. Let us begin by taking in 3 deep breaths, breathing in strength and expelling all weakness. Picture the lion in the heart. The heart is the center of our sense of identity, the center of our being. Dwell on the spiritual qualities represented by the lion. It radiates strength, fearlessness, majesty, mastery, freedom. The lion is a creature of the savannah. It has no enemies and therefore fears no one. It knows that it is a match for all circumstances. Let us feel we are established in that strength. Know you are free. Strength blazes from the eyes of the lion. It illumines our heart and courses outward into the thought channels of our mind, into our veins, the sinews of our arms, hands, feet. Our body is filled with strength. Our mind is established in strength. We know the self. The Atman fears nothing. not even death. We are centered in that which transcends time, space, and all that belongs to this fleeting world of matter. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So our topic today is the self is all. Just a quick review, so we have a sense of continuity. We began the Svetasvatara Upanishad with the first verse. The sage Svetasvatara said, seekers of the highest knowledge ask, what is the cause of this universe? Is it Brahman? From what are we born? By what do we live? In what is our permanence? O knowers of Brahman, what law governs us, whose lives run their course through happiness and all the rest? The accepted worldview based on realization in the Chandogya Upanishad, 3rd chapter, 14th section, verse 1. All this universe is verily Brahman, Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. From that all things originate. In that they dissolve. By that they are sustained. In tranquility, one should meditate on that. So that includes each one of us. Our true nature is the Atman, one with Brahman. The first time I heard this, I was thrilled to hear this. It is a sin to call a man a sinner. Our true nature is divine. The treasure is within us. Verse 3, deep within all beings he dwells, meaning Brahman, hidden from sight by the coverings of the gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. He presides over time, space, and all apparent causes. Swami Prabhupada commented on this verse. He explained, as we enter the temple of the body and become absorbed in consciousness of God, everything else disappears from our consciousness. And what remains is the ocean of existence, the ocean of knowledge, the ocean of bliss. It's really incomprehensible to imagine such an exalted state. This world disappears. Why? Because time and space exist within the mind. We can see our thoughts. We can perceive our emotions. We can remember our memories in the mind. So this mind is subtle matter. And when we experience our true nature, we transcend the mind. The second point in this particular verse, he presides over time, space, and all apparent causes. So when we become absorbed in the Atman, the mind dissolves in the ocean of consciousness. It eliminates time, space, and causation. This universe disappears and Brahman alone remains. And here we see the subtle implication of this sentence. Svetasvatara answers his own question. Is Brahman the cause of this universe? What is this universe? It is nothing other than the absolute appearing through time, space, and causation. All this time, we have been seeing nothing but Brahman. Verse 4, this vast universe is a wheel. Upon it are all creatures that are subject to birth, death, and rebirth. Round and round it turns and never stops. It is the wheel of Brahman. This is an interesting spiritual metaphor. And such metaphors help us to grasp the subtle spiritual principles that transcend language and logic. So we can imagine this wheel of Brahman. And Maya, in its causal state, is the circumference of the wheel's rim, which defines its own limiting power. It has a boundary, has a circumference. Hidden by the three gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas, encircling bands or hoops, strands of energy from which manifest this universe. This manifest universe is woven. So this binding the wheel to the axle is a leather strap. What is that strap? It is desire, which keeps the soul bound to the worldly existence. So our desires keep us here within a limited understanding of who we are and what this is, this universe. We feel we are the doer, so we are bound by the law of karma. And this wheel of Brahman gives us a picture of our limited human condition. Its bondage in Maya revolving round and round, birth after birth, but also of our true nature, whose eternal source is Brahman, outside of the limiting wheel, the confines of Maya. This is our tradition. This is our Vedanta tradition. How uplifting, how strengthening it is. Verse 6, as long as the individual self thinks it is separate from Brahman, it revolves upon the wheel in bondage to the laws of birth, death, and rebirth. But when, through the grace of Brahman, it realizes its unity, its identity with him, it revolves upon the wheel no longer. It achieves immortality. So we might ask how to separate the Atman, our true nature, from the non-Atman. Where do we start? In the Ashtavakra Samhita, chapter 1, verse 11, whatever you think you are, you become. He who thinks himself free is free, and he who thinks himself bound is bound. So we begin there. The first step is to hear this truth and then accept it. Accept it. And when we accept it, then we remind ourselves of it daily, this glorious truth. And the third step is to make it our own, to realize it. And all of us can realize that truth one day. Verse 7, he who is realized by transcending the world of cause and effect in deep contemplation is expressly declared by the scriptures to be the supreme Brahman. The pronoun he is often used in describing Brahman. He is the substance, all else the shadow. He is imperishable. The knowers of Brahman know him as the one reality behind all that seems. For this reason, they are devoted to him. Absorbed in him, they attain freedom from the wheel of birth, death, and rebirth. So what is liberation? The misconception that we are dewdrops that merge in the ocean of Brahman is banished. Swami Prabhupada in his commentary explains, no, behind everyone, and this is the radical truth, behind everyone, each of us, is that infinite ocean of existence, infinite ocean of knowledge, infinite ocean of bliss. We recognize that, we realize that, we experience that. And when we experience that, it's not something strange. We feel we have come home. There is the distinct feeling, I have reached my home. Swami Vivekananda beautifully expresses this noble truth. You and I and everything in the universe are that absolute, not parts, but the whole. You are the whole of that absolute, and so are all others, because the idea of part cannot come into it. These divisions, these limitations are only apparent, not the thing in itself. This is a radical truth. We must all try to remember we are the whole of that infinite reality. How then to realize this Atman? Sri Ramakrishna said, the nectar of Satchidananda is the nectar of immortality. Man does not die from diving into it. Dive deep. By diving deep in God, one becomes immortal. Those who have experienced have said, go within. That means to meditate, to concentrate, to contemplate. It also means to pray, because prayers are not answered from the outside. From where then are they answered? Vivekananda tells us. He is nearer to us than even our senses, nearer to us than our own thoughts. It is in and through him that we see and think. To see anything, I must first see him. To see this wall, I first see him and then the wall, for he is the eternal subject. Who is seeing whom? He is here in the heart of our hearts. He's talking about our true nature, pure consciousness. Think of that. He is nearer than the nearest. What irony. What a divine play. We're here with blinders on our eyes, searching for something that is within ourselves. He is the I am. And so we must try to remember, I am, and I know that I am. And that I is not only my I, but the I, the supreme self of every being. So to fully digest our spiritual premise, what do? We begin to practice discrimination. We must own that truth through rock solid logic, analysis, and yes, realization. We must try to impress upon the mind the joy of holy company, the satisfaction gained from regular meditation, the importance of spiritual self-development. And so with daily practice, how brief or how long, we begin where we are, the interest in our spiritual life begins to grow. We develop a long, continued practice through the years. And as our interest grows with concentration of mind, we feel we are gaining something solid. It's not out there. It's anchored within us. And then we taste the love of God, our love for God, and our meditation deepens. The truth, the light, shines in our consciousness. Verse 8. The Lord supports this universe, which is made up of the perishable and the imperishable, the manifest and the unmanifest. The individual soul, forgetful of the Lord, attaches itself to pleasure and thus is bound. When it comes to the Lord, it is freed from all its fetters. So the absolute is the sole support of all that is momentary and all that is enduring, all that we perceive and all that we perceive not. Vedanta tells us this universe, this cosmic emanation that we see around us, takes place through the power of Maya, Brahman's inscrutable power of avidya shakti, the power of ignorance. Maya is neither wholly real nor wholly unreal. It is dependent on Brahman. Brahman can exist without Maya, but Maya cannot exist without Brahman. And it is inseparable from it, just as the power to burn is inseparable from fire. These analogies keep coming up again and again in our spiritual discourse and in our scriptures. The example is given of the snake and the rope. How many times did I hear this example before suddenly, I get it. Due to darkness, our ignorance, it all happens at night, our darkness, our ignorance, we mistake the snake for the rope. So also this whole universe, this snake universe, is superimposed upon Brahman, the rope. So how does spiritual experience give us this knowledge of the relationship between Maya and Brahman, this snake universe, and rope Brahman, the reality of Brahman? In Samadhi, the snake universe vanishes. And when the jnani returns to normal consciousness, he or she knows beyond doubt this universe is a dream and negates all perceived forms. Sri Ramakrishna said, yes, the Brahma Jnani, and here's an interesting point, may even see the body of a divine incarnation as a glass lantern, or as a glass case or a lantern with a light burning inside, but knows the glass case, the body, is a mere covering and is therefore something to negate. So a Vedantin, an Advaitin, who follows the path of bhakti, uses the outer form of God to hook one's mind onto God. But as concentration and meditation deepen, the form dissolves and its mystery is revealed as the Supreme Brahman. This is what happens. So that is how Sri Ramakrishna's form and the form of any avatar and their divine consort are symbols of Brahman. I give the example of Jesus saying, in my Father's house are many mansions. We meditate on the form of Sri Ramakrishna, who dwelt in many mansions, many spiritual realms. And we, as a meditator, which of those realms will be revealed to us? That's the job of the avatar. That is what he decides, and he therefore reveals. The Advaita Vedanta negates the snake and affirms the rope. As regards oneself, I am not the body, nor the mind. And the world, this world is not solid. It is a dream. Verse 9. Mind and matter, master and servant, both have existed from beginningless time. The Maya which unites them has also existed from beginningless time. When all three, mind, matter, and Maya, are known as one with Brahman, then is it realized that the self is infinite and has no part in action. Then is it revealed that the self is all. So let's unpack this. There's a lot of confusion that surrounds this particular shloka due to grammatical irregularities, and it reverts to older Vedic Sanskrit, and therefore there are a number of different translations and commentaries around this particular shloka. But first, it's important to understand the nature of the transcendental experience. In Nirvikalpa Samadhi, one realizes oneness with Brahman, mind and matter, ego and universe disappear. There's no concept of being a distinct individual, just one ocean of existence, consciousness, bliss. And returning from that state, the Brahmagyani retains the memory of Brahman and now experiences his or her normal state of consciousness and the relative world differently. Coming back from that highest experience, we can never see the world the same. Why? Because the Atman is no longer a subject to attain. One becomes the witness after Nirvikalpa Samadhi. That identity never leaves one, and sees this universe as illusion without reality. With an ingrained memory of Brahman, now the world appears only as a prolonged dream. Sri Ramakrishna gives the beautiful example. Once a farmer had a son at an advanced age. He and his wife were very fond of their son. Then the child died, and the wife wept bitterly. But the old man's eyes remained dry. The wife complained to her neighbors. Then the farmer explained, "Do you know why I'm not crying? Last night I dreamt I had become a king and the father of 7 princes. These princes were handsome and virtuous. They grew in stature and acquired knowledge in the various arts. Suddenly I awoke. Now I am wondering whether I should weep for those 7 children or this one boy." Sri Ramakrishna explained, to the Gyanis, the waking state is no more real than the dream state. Another transcendental experience is that when the Brahmagyani returns from Nirvikalpa Samadhi and lives in between the transcendental state, the Nitya, and the lower plane of consciousness, which is the Lila, experiencing this world as a divine play. It's not the Brahmagyani's vivid Samadhi memory that now reveals this world as a dream. This state is that of Vijnana, and the Vijnani returns to experience firsthand the divinity of the universe. Mind and matter are experienced as one with God. God is experienced in everyone and everything. Forms are experienced as pulsations of consciousness. Sri Ramakrishna said, the realization that God alone has become the universe and all living beings is vijnana. It's important to understand the difference between these two states. And I believe Swami Atmarupananda explained it the most clearly. So I'd like to share what he said. The Brahmagyani sees the subtle duality. Brahman is experienced within all forms, which of themselves are unreal and are therefore something to be negated. The Vijnani sees the reality of Brahman as all forms, not in all forms. Svetasvatara had that experience of Vijnana. Swami Nikhilananda commented that the Supreme Lord appears as Ishvara. Both Ishvara, the personal God, and the Jiva, or the individual soul, are in reality Brahman, which is their substratum. Therefore, they are called unborn. Now the question comes, Brahman is unborn, but how is it possible for the Ishvara, the creating and ruling God, and Jiva, bound by time and space, to be unborn? How can you compare the two? The answer is, they too both have consciousness as their essential nature. But for the Ishvara, it's a manifestation of degree, a greater degree of power. Swami Prabhavananda's translation of this verse reads, when all three, mind, matter, and Maya, are known as one with Brahman, then it is realized that the self is infinite and has no part in action. So what does that mean? Svetasvatara sees this manifold universe as the Vijnani. Maya is the power united with Brahman. And from that power, mind and matter have emanated. Brahman and Maya, Shakti, are united, just as fire and its power to burn. Maya Shakti has evolved as this universe of mind and matter. This world has evolved from that power of Brahman. So what does this mean? It's a lot of words. It's a lot of philosophical concepts. Sri Ramakrishna said at Kasipur, and this was close to his Mahasamadhi, do you know what I see right now? I see that it is God himself who has become all this. It seems to me that men and other living beings are made of leather, and that it is God himself who, dwelling inside these leather cases, moves the hands, the feet, the heads. I had a similar vision once before, when I saw houses, gardens, roads, men, cattle, all made of one substance. It was as if they were all made of wax. Sri Ramakrishna's experiences are something to meditate upon. There's an analogy here. We start with a pot, the effect whose cause is clay, nothing but clay through and through. So we have a clay pot. Without the clay, there is no pot. We have clay alone. Clay is non-dual in regards to the pot. The shape of the pot doesn't exist apart from its material cause. Apart from clay, No real thing exists. So what actually exists is clay appearing as a pot. Clay appearing as a form we call pot. Svetasvatara and Ramakrishna saw Brahman as so many forms. They saw the manifold universe as Brahman, through and through. They saw existence appearing as this universe. The effect is merged in the cause. The effect has no existence apart from Brahman. So the Upanishads uphold two ideals. The first, Brahman alone is real. The universe is unreal. Brahman and Atman are one. And the path is Neti Neti Atma. And the second, Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. All this is Brahman. Iti Iti. But first we have to go through the path of Neti Neti to develop the discrimination before Iti Iti is revealed to us. Svetasvatara's experience, the second transcendental experience, Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma, all is verily Brahman. The seer who realizes this transcends the law of karma. Such an illumined soul who sees all three, mind, matter, and Maya, as one with Brahman, then is it realized that the self is infinite and has no part in action. Still a little difficult to wrap our heads around this. Why? There is no longer any sense of ego that I am the doer. And what does this mean? Rather, not I, but thou. So how does the Vijnani, such as Svetasvatara, then move through this world without feeling they are the mover? The Jnani and the Vijnani see everything different from us. They do nothing. The sense of I-ness, the small I, doesn't exist. To them, nothing is happening. Actions proceed. Everything happens by the will of God. As we find in Acts 17:28, for in him we live, move, and have our being. All right, can we have an example of this? Swami Vivekananda's itinerant days of wandering give us a wonderful example of this. And I highly recommend that you review this chapter in his life and what it brought out in him. Referring to those days, as a pilgrim, he was totally dependent on God. Once it was described in his life, he turned into a forest, a trackless forest, because he felt that God was leading him. Of how he went on for 3 days, starving, and how he was more perfectly happy than he had ever been before, because he felt that he was entirely in the hands of God. When my time comes, he said, I shall like to go up the mountain and there by the Ganges, lay myself down, and with the water singing over me, I shall go to sleep, and above me will tower the Himalayas. Men have gone mad for those mountains. We have in our order wonderful sadhus who have wandered. And from those wandering days comes a tremendous strength, tremendous strength. There's one Swami I'm very fond of, Swami Shiva Moyananda. He's a trustee of the order, and I believe he's one of the vice presidents now. And he talked about his wandering days, and I heard about his wandering days from another trustee of the order, Swami Atma Ramananda. He and the present head of the Moscow Center, Jyoti Rupananda, they left suddenly to become itinerant wanderers. And other monks complained to Swami Shankarananda. See, these monks, they went off without getting your permission. And Swami Shankarananda said, my disciple has gone to perform austerities. And that was the end of it. And they met with much hardship. At times in South India, they had nothing to eat for days. In fact, I heard that they went into a dumpster and found a rotten onion. That was all they could eat. And of course, they got exceptionally ill. Now, this Swami Shiva Moyananda, later he was instated at the Seva Pratishthan, one of our educational complexes. And during the Naxalite revolution, the police came in and took a boy in the middle of the night and brought him down to the Ganges. This is at Bellarmine, to shoot him and throw him into the Ganges. And when Swami Shivananda was awakened, he ran down to the Ganges and embraced the boy, and he said to the police officers, you will have to shoot me first. And the officers were so stunned, they ran away. This is the strength that comes. How can we, as spiritual aspirants, proceed in our sadhana to reach such lofty stages of knowledge? We begin where we are, with the help of our Guru, but acknowledge full well the path before us and its various stages, which have been trodden by the sages. Sri Ramakrishna simply tells us what these stages are. The jiva at first remains in a state of ignorance. He is not conscious of God, but of the multiplicity. He sees many things around him. Then, on attaining knowledge, he becomes conscious that God dwells in all beings. Suppose a man has a thorn in the sole of his foot. He gets another thorn and takes out the first one. In other words, he removes the thorn of ajnana, ignorance, by means of the thorn of jnana, knowledge. But in the third stage, on attaining vijnana, he discards both thorns, knowledge and ignorance. Then he talks intimately with God, day and night. It is no mere vision of God. So it's a long path before us. But is there any way we as aspirants can learn to apply that attitude of jnani and of vijnani here and now? We're impatient. We want it now. Yes, the scriptures tell us, by making the revelation the spiritual practice, we can try to live totally dependent on God. As a bhakta, Sri Ramakrishna prescribed, surrender everything at the feet of God. What else can you do, he said. Give him the power of attorney. Let him do whatever he thinks best. Then he used the analogy to drive his point home. If you rely on a great man, he will never injure you. But we may ask, isn't that getting away from the path of Jnana Yoga? Swami Brahmananda explained. Some enlightened souls experience the one undivided existence. Then they know that the seeming multiplicity of the universe is God's divine play. They know that the infinite God is born as an avatar for his own divine sport. He continued, once when Sri Krishna was dancing in ecstasy, one shepherdess said to another, look, my friend, the truth of Vedanta is dancing. Sri Krishna is the supreme Brahman. He is the infinite, changeless spirit playing as man. Swami Brahmananda ended by saying, beyond this, there is yet another deeper and fathomless spiritual experience. So from these words, we see how bhakti and jnana converge and ultimately lead to the same reality. As a jnani, egoism dissolves when we affirm. It is the light of pure consciousness within that illumines the mind. Swami Prabhupada commented on this. The fact is that every moment of your lives, you are guided by that power, good or bad, whatever you may be doing. It is this consciousness, the light of consciousness, which is God, that gives you the power to think, that gives you the power to act. But of course, he said, God, as that pure light, remains unconcerned whether you perform good or bad deeds. He's talking about the Advaitic principle of pure consciousness. That consciousness within is like air which remains unaffected by any odor. Similarly, that power that your mind, your body, or your senses is expressing remains unattached. But when we penetrate deeper into our own awareness and become yoked to that reality, we can never then take a wrong step. How then to access that inner consciousness, that treasure within us? By trying to remember when we watch a movie, we don't see the white screen. We become engrossed in the images that are superimposed upon that white screen. Sometimes with children, they get so excited when they're watching a horror movie that they yell at the screen. These images that are falling on the screen. The screen is the witness consciousness used in this metaphor. Swami Vivekananda explains, behind this never-ending chain of motion is the Purusha, the Atman, the changeless, the colorless, the pure. All these impressions are merely reflected upon it as a magic lantern throws images upon a screen without in any way tarnishing it. Swami Atmarupananda explains, so also, we're so absorbed with everything around us, but actually we're just floating in the space of the movie theater within our own awareness. We're just floating in the space of the movie theater within our awareness. The bubble of our experience, we think we're contained in it, but the bubble of our experience floats in our consciousness. When we dream, we're absorbed in the reality of the dream. Where is that happening? It is just a bubble of experience in my awareness. Rupert Spira, another Advaitin, Being Aware of Being Aware is his book. It's a wonderful little book. He describes, awareness is the luminous, self-aware presence upon which or within which all experience appears. Enlightenment or awakening is not a new or extraordinary kind of experience. It is the self-revelation of the very nature of experience itself. Sri Ramakrishna said, the true nature of the self is that it is the supreme Brahman. Then is it revealed that the self is all. This cosmic self and the individual self are the same. We see our own self in all forms of this manifold universe and rejoice. And so we can begin by first trying to learn to see our own self in all forms of this manifold universe and remind ourselves again and again of our own self existing in our own self existing in all forms and rejoice. And now I'd like to end with another guided meditation that is the best kind of conclusion for this kind of talk. In the Vedanta system, the I am is the trail that leads to pure consciousness within the individual. Within the individual I am. The intuition in the individual consciousness of the self, the manifestation of Sat Swarup. And this manifestation means there is still some ignorance associated with it. But by holding on to the I am, that leads us back to pure consciousness. But by the time we reach pure consciousness, there is then no more sense of I am. What the I am was pointing at remains, but it is silent. The sense of I am disappears when there is no longer objectivity to oppose it. The I disappears in the self. So let us sit with eyes closed or half closed. Breathe in and out deeply 3 times to calm the mind. I am. The first perception before we experience anything else. The first perception when we wake up in the morning and then start defining ourselves is I am. But like a fish in water, which doesn't know what water is, it has nothing to contrast with water. Or like wearing glasses for a long time, we forget we're wearing them. We're seeing everything else after we see through our glasses. So also, we are not aware of our amness, the primary fact of our experience. Everything else is secondary. Try to feel the pure sense of I am. Focus on the sense of I am, not repeating it like a mantra, but try to feel the bare fact that I am. Not a man or a woman, young or old, smart or stupid, good or bad, just I am. It's hard to keep the mind steady, so try to focus on the presence of the body, not as I am, but as an anchor to keep the mind in the here and now. And along with that, Try to feel the presence of I am pervading the body and everything around it. The simple sense of your own existence is the background behind everything you perceive. Try to focus on the simple felt presence of your own self-existence, not to define it, not to look for a thing, but feel I am. As you do this practice, you will feel a sense of eternity, timelessness about the sense of I am. You will feel time as something added on top of the sense of I am. You will feel I am endures behind and prior to time itself. There is something eternal about the self, not subject to time, not subject to the waves of the experience in this world. You will feel something tranquil, joyful, sacred. And as we become aware that I am, we will feel joy, joy about existence. You will reach a point that everything you perceive is within the sense, within the experience of I am. Our own self-existence is the background of everything we perceive.